Now, they say that you're not supposed to eat or drink during podcasts or recordings. I would just like to say that I have been doing podcasts since 2004 or 5. And I feel like I can set my own rules. And if I want to eat and drink during a podcast, then I can do it. And it'll be fine. I just have one topic today. I've got a great thumbnail for the image thought up. We'll see if I can execute it. That's pretty much what the value that I'm going to bring is. And that is this idea of pairing, which starts with the idea of pair programming, but in the Tanzu world, in the Pivotal Labs way of thinking, the way that we try to get customers of ours to do software, and the way that I've seen many organizations be successful with software, pairing means having two people pairing up on various roles, not only for developers so that you're writing code with each other, but also for product managers so that you're prioritizing backlogs and figuring out what the most important business valuable thing is to work on for this iteration, and designers, if you're lucky enough to have designers, kind of coming up with understanding the people using the software, what jobs they're trying to accomplish, how to best craft up the workflows and wizards and things like that around them. You know, do I use a serif or a sans serif font? Like, how deep should my drop shadow go? Very important critical decisions. Hold on a minute. The other effect that the video has, you can see stuff stick to my mustache, which I know people love. But oftentimes, I mean, unless you've really done pair programming before, it probably seems like a dumb idea. One, just from a sheerly spreadsheet thing, you're basically having productivity and doubling costs, which I guess are sides of the same coin, it seems like, right? We have two people sitting at a laptop doing 1 unit of work, whereas you used to have two people doing 2 units. And then I think also, at least speaking for myself, I don't really like working with people, especially when it comes to kind of in real time. Every now and then, people used to try to they would want to pair up with me on some document we were writing or presentation, and I just found it awful. I just can't work that way. My mind locks up and I can't talk with people. And, you know, I think technical people are largely like that. However, I have observed over the years that there are at least 6, if not many, many more benefits that people get from pairing up, from pair programming. So I will go through those 6. It's a listicle. So the first one is that you do end up, and I don't have citations for this because I haven't really prepared, but if you look at, I think I wrote up a lot of this in my book, Monolithic Transformation, which you can get for free if you go to cote.pizza, and you can find it there. And I think there's some citations, and I go more in depth about studies that have shown things here. But you do increase the overall quality of your code. And the reason is, there's quality in several dimensions. One of them is that if you're doing kind of a strict way of doing pairing, you have one person who's very frequently writing tests for the code that's being run, right? So your code you're doing test-driven development. Now, test-driven development has all sorts of benefits of clarity about the code, cutting back on excess code, right? You only write enough code to make the test run successfully. And then also you have tests, right? So you're helping pay down or prevent technical debt, right? If to use the Michael Feathers definition, if legacy software is software that doesn't have tests for it because you're afraid to change that code, and the only reason you would call something legacy is because you don't like it and you fear it. So therefore, it's generally code that has no tests. But when you're doing pairing, you generally have tests for it. So I think it's pretty well proven that it makes the overall quality of your code better. And this alone kind of erases those notions that you're doubling costs and having productivity, right? Because quality is ultimately the big bugbear of software, getting code that works. And you can use that dimming idea of quality, which doesn't necessarily get any benefits from that, what we would call product market fit, that you're doing something that's actually useful, that works. But, you know, it does overall improve quality that you have. Boy, I really enthusiastically closed that one out. Now, I think the second benefit, especially when it comes to the ideas, that I talk about a lot, that you want to be a learning organization, you want to transform, you want to constantly be experimenting and getting better at the way you run your business and your software, is there really is a huge benefit that comes with pairing when it comes to learning, right? And this is, hopefully kind of obvious from anyone who's lived for a while, is that when you work with someone else, you often learn from that person, right? And you may not learn in a pedantry kind of way where they're teaching you, but you just learn by being exposed to different ways of doing things, right? They might have a different way to implement a method. They might have a different way of thinking about how they prioritize things. They might have a different understanding of how the business functions. And you as well, it's bi-directional, right? So you're always going to be exposing people to new ways of doing things. And merely by not knowing something and asking a question often is a good way to clarify, if not enforce or strengthen notions that other people know, right? There's this constant sharpening and honing and training, if you will, that goes on when you're working with someone else, right? Like you're constantly working on and improving, if not maintaining that baseline of skill that you have. And, if you look at all the surveys that are out there about like using the Kubernetes, doing the DevOps and the agile software development, all of this business, right? Lack of skills and not being able to find people who have these skills. And sadly, managers not trusting that their people are competent is a huge barrier, a huge concern that people have. So any chance that you get to, on a daily basis, increase training and learning amongst your staff, right, is a huge win. And pairing does this for you just sort of effortlessly. Now, the next one, kind of a managerial concern, but and it gets us into the idea of rotating pairs as well. But we have this, largely the world of programming largely being driven by nerdy males who like kind of have a somewhat cynical view of things. There's this notion, I forget what we call it nowadays, but there's this notion of a bus number. And that is, on a given software development team, if we want to, there's another word for this. You can call it, HR, disaster recovery and high availability, which is to say, I want to manage the ongoing risk of the system that I'm working with failing in some way and causing me to not get the outcomes that I want, which is a bunch of highfalutin, vacuous terms. But what that means is that if I've got 10 people on my development team, I rely on those 10 people to know how the software works, to kind of do the ongoing maintenance and just coding, the initial coding of that. I need these 10 people to do things. And can I do it with 9 people? Probably. Could I do it with 8 people? Probably. Could I do it with 2 people? Probably not. Right? So a bus number, again, from, I don't know, there's probably a better phrase for it, but it says, what are the number of people who could get hit and let's say incapacitated, not just killed or not killed, but hit by a bus, and this team could still function, right? So you want to have I might have gotten it wrong one way or the other, but the idea is like, how much slack do we have in the system? How much, what's the reliability of the system that we have? Now, when you're doing pairing, and especially rotating pairing, and rotating means that you don't only pair with the same person all the time, which is something I would end up doing, right? I would not want to pair with anyone, and then once I found 1 or 2 people, I would only want to ever work with them. But usually, when you're doing rotating pairing, you work with at least 2 people each day, different people, right? And not only is it people that you're swapping off on, but it is different parts of the system, different things that you're doing, right? So you're not only a back-end person or a front-end person or whatever. You don't only work on, whatever. But what you're doing is you're increasing that, you're doing risk management better on the team for disaster recovery and high availability, so to speak, of the team, because you're spreading knowledge amongst all the people of how the various parts of the system work, right? So there's not really specialized knowledge anymore. Things kind of level out. And you can start to see, all of these things kind of feed on each other. You can also start to see how this improves quality, right? And learning, of course, but you're learning all different parts of the system. But quality is increased as well, because generally on software projects and infrastructure things as well, generally on technical projects, when you allow someone to specialize and be kind of like the only person who knows different parts of the system, one, they can start to demand a lot of favors and maybe even compensation, because if they leave, you got problems. But 2, they are not always seeking the best way of doing things, right? So they're not getting a diversity in input and ideas because they're the only one who understands it and could think of something. And it's hard to kind of like constantly be improving by exposing it to new ideas, whatever that system may be. Back when I developed, it was always the build. The build became this specialized thing, which became quite the bottleneck. And then also things like, specialized database things were an issue. And every time daylight savings came around, there were the few people who knew how to actually handle daylight savings in a global SaaS product. So that was also a specialized thing. But anyhow, so when you're doing pairing, you really you have that resiliency entered into the system. Now, number 4. Hold on. Let me take a sip here, get some more energy. Look at my napkin. Don't worry. My wife totally grossed out by stuff sticking on my mustache. You can tell, generally, I think the more grossed out people are with something, as long as they're friends with you, the faster they are to tell you that you're doing something gross. They just like, boom, right on it instantly, which is a interesting pattern. This weekend, when you're with your friends or loved ones, notice how quickly they tell you when you're doing something gross versus when they don't. And I bet it correlates pretty strongly with things that they have strong feelings about with grossness. So also something that I think is more or less unexpected, kind of outside of the realm of what you would normally expect to see or plan for when it comes to pair programming, is that people tend to be happier, right? Now, obviously, I joke a lot about not liking other people and wanting to work with them, but even I kind of trust that if I could get over that, if I was pairing with people, as I was talking about yesterday when I had my catch-up meeting with someone and various other people, like just being with other people and working with them generally is a source of happiness, right? So having interactions with 2 people every day, or 1, and kind of entering that flow with them and accomplishing things. I think there's a certain sense of camaraderie that you end up getting that really, really does raise morale on the team. Now, morale is important because you're going to be relying a lot when it comes to creative processes, troubleshooting difficult things that happen. I mean, doing all the difficult things of software. Hopefully you're not doing the easy things of software because those are things that you should automate and not spend time on, right? If you're doing a bunch of easy stuff in software that's effortless to do, that's not cool, man. You got to get all the easy stuff over here and handled and automated and automatic, things like the infrastructure that you run and the platform that you're using. The decisions about your architecture, how things are done, you should kind of start with the implied architecture that a cloud-native platform like Kubernetes brings, the way of packaging things up with a Tanzu application service, right? There's lots of decisions. We used to call it an opinionated architecture, but perhaps what we should say is it's a ready-to-go architecture out of the box, just like the old Java days and things like that. So, I mean, those are tedious things to sort out, but there's solutions for them and they're easy. And you really shouldn't bother yourself with that stuff. So you're going to be focusing on a lot of hard things if you're doing it right. And it's hard to do that if you're bored and curmudgeon-y. I find that when you're working on difficult stuff, it's a lot easier if you're happy and you kind of like the people that you're working with, which is, you see this effect with pairing a lot, right? Like people don't realize how pleased they are at the end of the day, at the end of the release, because they've been pairing. It's a new experience that at the end of the day, they feel like they've done a lot of work. It's very fulfilling, which brings us to the 5th thing. And that is, I don't know if there's studies. I don't know how you would study this, beyond grad students, which I always find studies of programming involving grad students. That's not really I was never a grad student or a bachelor student of computer science. I took a philosophy and English degree instead. I was a programmer at the time. So, I started in high school. So I figured why study this? It would have been nice. I still don't really know what a Q sort is or anything like that. Or how chips work. I just kind of taught myself programming, yay me. But, there's a lot of detrimental stuff that I still don't really know how it functions. But anyhow, when you do studies with people in college, I mean, that is such a completely different environment than not only programming at tech companies, but at enterprises that I don't know. I generally, unless they're really a really simple finding, I don't really trust them very much. Anyhow, anecdotally, when I've talked with large organizations and kind of seen them talk, they find that when you do pairing, you're a lot more productive. People will actually produce a lot more, I hesitate to say code, but whatever. They have a lot more output, whatever that may be. And I think, again, the reason is kind of, again, all of this is kind of effects of the same thing. One, you're not over coding things, right? Like you have a good governor, a good regulator on doing too much, getting caught up in doing coding work. You're just trying to satisfy that test and kind of move on, right? When you've got someone looking over your shoulders or you got bi-directional shoulder looking, you tend to not goof off so much as well, right? You tend to kind of focus on the task. And I think that kind of like mutual focusing on the task, not gold plating and over-serving it, and all sorts of other things means that you actually spend more of your time coding, right? You don't go over to do some research, as I used to call it when I would look at the internet for hours on end when I was bored at work. You don't like always try to do new things when you don't need to. Like you just sort of like you have someone, both people are making sure that they're focusing and working on the code, and you end up actually being much more productive if you have two people there. And I think the older, from way back when, the figure that I used to use, among other things, kind of managing the process, but pairing contributed significantly to this was that at Allstate, they had like a 70% increase, or they went up to 70% productivity. I forget the exact figure. I should probably look that up before I cite it. But, there's huge increases you get when people start doing pairing. So the sixth one comes into play when you're looking to scale up transformation, which this is the topic that I talk most frequently with, right? Because I often talk with managers and executives and enterprise architects, the people who have had success on one or two teams doing their software in a new way, but want to scale it out to thousands of people, hundreds of software products and projects and things like that. And one of the issues that they have is how do we spread this new way of doing things outward? And there's many ways to do it, which I go over, internal marketing, starting small and spreading that kind of success out, but on and on and on. But I think one of the key things, and you see this in recent DevOps reports and other things like that, is you not only want tops-down change, right? Like setting up the system and the culture so that doing things in a new way is the easiest path and is encouraged and blah, blah, blah. But there is kind of a bottoms-up, and then, let's see if we can go crazy with the geometry here. A bottoms-up, and then a x-axis, is that lateral sort of spread of things. And what that means is, again, think of the rotating pairing, right? So within a team, would that be intra-team? You're pairing and rotating, and you're spreading knowledge how to do that. Now, over the course of several quarters or whatever, you take individuals from those teams who are outgoing, empathetic, person-interested people who also, you probably want to over-index on the sort of empathetic, works well with other people, not just technical awesomeitude. And you take them and you seed them in other teams, right? And they kind of seed that pairing and rotating throughout that team until you've kind of like brought them up, that new team up to the level and functioning and understanding and critical, trusting that this process works, right? What they're doing is they're trusting one of their peers from their own organization who has had success doing things this way, right? They didn't just read a book or listen to some wackadoodle video like this one here and hear that it's something that they should do. There's actually someone in flesh and blood. We should assume it might be a really well-made robot or something, but someone there who has gone through this and is kind of a testament that it works. So that's, a thing that you see a lot is this seeding, and not only pairing, like seeding someone into a team, but having that person pair up with the people and slowly spread that out, and then just like that old shampoo ad, like then you take, you got two people that you can put on two different projects and so forth and so on, whatever that kind of spread is. So there's a huge amount of benefits for pairing, right? And I think it's definitely something worth trying. And most everyone that I've talked with or that I've read about who does pairing for long enough, they end up really liking it. I have one of my great friends, Charles Lowell.
This is what we call the leap and lounge. And the leap and lounge involves me leaping through the doorway and being fully extended on the couch. And I'm going to attempt to do so with a fresh pot of steaming coffee.
Who works, he's got a little shop back in Austin called The Front Side. And I'm pretty sure they exclusively do pairing. And he's been doing it forever with his team of anywhere from at any given year, 4 to 15 to 20 people who are working there as consultants. And I mean, he's quite the programmer. And once he brings people into doing things in a pairing way, they find that it works really effectively. It raises productivity and all these other things, morale, and they never want to go back. They just want to do things that way. Well, speaking of never wanting to go back, are you thinking, that sounds great, but how would I even get started? I'm here in the maelstrom, if that's how you say it, the chaos of how things are currently operating. I'd like some assistance to figure out what's going on there. Well, boy, we've got some stuff for you. First of all, let's start with if you just want to talk with someone, right? You know what they say. Sometimes you just need someone to talk with. What you can do is you can book a little workshop with us some time, and it can be an hour, half a day, or a day. If you go to cote.pizza, as I'll show you here, it'll zoom you over to this page where I list a bunch of things. Really got to update it. But you can go here to Software Development Office Hours, kind of fill it out, talk about what's going on, and we can each figure out mutually if we can help each other out. Definitely if you want to talk about pairing and how you change the way you do software, that is absolutely something that we help people with all the time with our Pivotal Labs group. But also, to that point, if you're also wanting to build out the infrastructure, the platform, the stack, all of the supporting stuff that enables a more agile way of doing software, getting to the point where you can deploy your software daily, kind of innovate and try out new ideas, you're probably going to want to put something like Kubernetes in place. And if you're an operations person or a developer or whatever, if you go to kube.academy, we got all sorts of good free training, very in-depth. I haven't gone through all of them, but I have done many of them. And they're great. They're really good at explaining what this thing is, how it fits into what you're having. There's one that's for VI admins in particular that's, as I talked, we interviewed a couple episodes ago. That's pretty nice to go through. Now, also in the developer world, I was just trying to take a pass for this developer side about a kind of an explainer of what digital transformation was. I was thinking I should do the Cote's Codex for coders. That's pretty good. I should write that down somewhere. But kind of explaining what these highfalutin sort of BS bull stuff, I think, terms are, and kind of making them a pragmatic tool that people can use. Like digital transformation, kind of a bull stuff term, but it can be transformed, if you will, into a very effective, sharp tool to use. But if you want to get into that and a whole lot of other topics, you can go to tanzu.vmware.com/developer and check that out. So all of this stuff is pretty easy to get to. I put the show notes for these episodes and an archive of the videos over at cote.io/Tanzu Talk. You can check that out. And I didn't really mention it, but speaking of the show notes, you should go over there, and in the podcast that we do, Dormain has a review with some of the people who work in the U.S. Air Force on the famed Kessel Run project, where they've applied all sorts of these practices. I'm pretty sure they do pair programming. I haven't finished listening to it, but it's in an area I've been interested in this week, which is when you put a platform in place, your cloud native platform from Kubernetes to a platform as a service like the Tanzu application service, there's a team of people, if not teams of people, who run that, who product manage it, and that's what's going on in that interview there. So I'm looking forward to listening to it. So with that, tomorrow's Halloween, if you're into that kind of thing. So have a spooky one, and we'll see everyone next time. Bye bye.